Hey everybody, welcome to the PC Perspective Podcast. This is episode 385, being recorded on February 3rd, 2016. I'm Ryan Shrout.
I'm Jeremy Hellstrom.
I'm Josh Walrath.
And I'm Alan Maldentano.
And boom, he hits it on the first try. We didn't have to redo the intro.
Yeah.
Like, there's no labels on these buttons. I just know now which buttons are
You
which.
somehow figured it out.
I figured it out what 4 buttons indicate properly. Like, if I want to show you the PC, I can do that. If I want to show you Jeremy, I can do that. Josh, and then us. I can do all those things.
Yeah. If only Ken would
Push
do
them
that.
all at once and see what happens.
Do all the
No, I will not
do
do
not
those things.
push them all at
I will
once.
not do those things. So, Alan, Ken is not here with us today.
He is not.
He's, I don't know, gallivanting around.
We have secretly replaced Ken with a 8-button PCB.
It has 8 stereo headphone jacks in the back of it, too, for no purpose at this point, as far as I can tell.
That's true.
But, yeah, so Ken is out of town. Alan is here.
Yes, I'm right here.
And so we're going to do the show without him. And when he comes back, he may not have a job.
Yeah, we'll change the locks.
Because I have to edit the podcast by myself tomorrow. I have to edit the video.
Yeah.
Upload it. I have to do RSS feeds. All this by myself. It's kind of unacceptable when you think about it.
I guess that's why we pay Ken. Yeah. It's probably worth the hassle.
I don't know.
No?
It's a pretty big hassle. So let's get into it. I don't know what else we're going to get into here. So we'll talk about hardware and stuff. We do record the show on Wednesday nights, 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Pacific at pcper.com/live. If you need a gentle reminder of that, I encourage you to go to pcper.com/subscribe. You get this little page here that asks for your name and your email address. Good job over there. And when you do that, you'll get put on a mailing list, and we basically send you an email, 90 minutes, an hour, 15 minutes, a day. Sometime before we do a live stream, you'll get an email telling you exactly what that live stream is going to be and how to attend it if there's prizes involved. We did a stream last Thursday, a racing stream that Josh was kind enough to organize for us. And we gave away a racing wheel, $200 racing wheel from Thrustmaster. So
Nice.
you were there, Josh. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And not only that, but I even got it sent out.
You did. You did? Fantastic.
Somewhat timely basis.
That's all great news. So if you want to take part in those types of events, then make sure you go to pcper.com/subscribe. If you're looking for another way to contribute to PC Perspective, maybe you love seeing all the effort that goes into creating this podcast, like this weird thing that Ken kind of created and Alan kind of did some soldering on yesterday so that we could actually continue to do the live stream. And you think, what, those guys are working hard. Ryan's up like fixing audio things he doesn't know how to do really. He's hitting buttons like this on this thing, right?
It's got to be worth at least $5 a month.
It's got to be, that's at least a $5 a month type amount of effort, I think, guys. And you can contribute to our Patreon if you go to patreon.com/pcper. You can go here. You can see the little video about why we're doing Patreon. You can see some of our milestones, some of our rewards for backers. And you get to see a picture of Josh in a bathtub. So if nothing else, I think it's worth going to patreon.com/pcper if for that. And so we thank everybody who is currently a patron, a contributor through that service. And for those of you who are considering joining, we would greatly appreciate it if you would do so. So again, patreon.com/pcper for that. Let's go ahead and get into content that has occurred this week. First up, we've got Tomb Raider performance we're going to look at. This is the new game, Rise of the Tomb Raider. It is not called Tomb Raider: Rise of the Tomb Raider, which is how I had been saying it up in the whole week building up to its release.
Wait. Are you entering the Tomb Raider :
Tomb Raider :
Because that could be illegal in most states.
It probably is.
But it would look amazing in this game.
Yeah, it would. The visuals in this game are actually pretty stunning. The last Tomb Raider, like the 2013, I think, the reboot of Tomb Raider was actually really, really good. This one is even better. It came out on Xbox One, I think, in November. And it's not going to come out on PS4 until this coming November. But they released it on PC just this past week. Some really, really, really stunning visuals. We actually have a 4K 60 hertz video that you can watch embedded in this story as well, if your PC can play it back. That is our 60-second test run that this screenshot is part of. that you can look at.
Nice work to GeForce Experience to be able to record that.
Yeah, GeForce Experience is what recorded this for us because Fraps was killing our system.
It just completely
trying to
killed it.
record at 4K. And honestly, I'm not even going to try to play it back on this little 2-core laptop.
Don't do that
either. So we tested 980 Ti, 980, and a 970, and then a Fury X, an R9 Nano, and an R9 390. Just a handful of cards, 6 different GPUs. Look through performance here. And this is a beastly game for performance, right? Also, keep in mind, this screenshot right here, I'm going to click on this and expand it out. I think I am. No, I'm not. I'm going to do that on the last page. But so a 980 Ti running at very high image quality settings, but HBAO Plus turned down to on because that is one of the what do you call that? GameWorks features that was enabled that I didn't want people to complain about. But if you look at this, the black line there in the observed frame rate is the R9 Fury X, and the pink line is the GTX 980 Ti, and they're pretty close. The 980 Ti is a little bit faster, it looks like, in some particular areas, but like you're never getting really above 80 frames per second, and you're dipping below 60 several times, right? And this is with a 980 Ti.
And that's only 25 by
and
14.
that's 25 by 14, right, exactly. It's not even the 4K resolution. Now, this is an unfortunate thing that occurred. We were using the 16.1 driver. Apparently, since I published this, they came out with the 16.1.1 yesterday afternoon, I think, and I haven't tested to see if this changed anything on AMD's
It looks pretty
side.
regular.
So the orange and the black lines there are the Fury X and the Nano. And you see they have these kind of regular, kind of patterned high frame rate.
You fed it the Metamucil right before you tested, didn't you?
Yes, it was a very regular pattern of frame time spikes.
Okay. So that's a low frame rate spike.
Yes.
Because the time spiked high. So it
Correct.
basically
Frame time went high. The game
just,
basically stalled.
Yeah, the game just stuttered for
1-2 frames, whatever it was.
Yeah.
And if you zoom in here, you can see like actually there's a bunch that happens kind of in this middle
pretty bad
section.
one. Yeah.
And you can actually see the NVIDIA cards here as well. They dip down. Actually,
Yeah.
So there's something funny going on there in the game, but it's not a loading time or anything like that. It's just normal gameplay, and as a result, like so you can see the 980 Ti is a little bit faster than the Fury X there, but this frame variance kind of your percentile graph shows the value of those frames.
Yep.
The black and orange lines skyrocket up right at about the 95th percentile. The orange a little bit before that, showing you that that last 5%, that worst 5% of frames on the Fury X and Nano are bad.
Yeah.
They're not good. Whereas the pink and green lines stay down there. Now 4K. Man, is this killing hardware. We're running at like 35 frames per second on the two top end cards.
Yeesh.
But you still have this frame stutter, whatever, right there in the two AMD cards.
But which was supposedly fixed in the driver.
I don't know. I don't know if they even really said that, but there was a driver that offered hot fixes, and I think Tomb Raider was
I'm sure they'll
listed
do
in that.
something for that. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know how
I would
quick,
think so, but here's what's interesting, right? On the next page, we look at the R9 390, and we compare it to the 970. We keep the Nano and the GTX 480 in there just for context.
Okay.
Right? The 970 is significantly slower than the 390 here, which is interesting and worth note.
Yep.
But look at this graph. This is the... you see, the black line is the Nano now, and it has the same cadence of frame rate spikes.
Sure.
The orange line is now the R9 390, which is a different architecture completely. It doesn't use HBM. It has 8 gigs of memory, and there are none of those.
Ooh.
None.
So it doesn't... a driver could fix it still, but it doesn't appear to be a driver-specific issue, right? There's some combination of it and hardware, right? Clearly, if the Hawaii graphics
there's
GPU...
Something that the driver path that gets taken for that architecture versus the other.
So it's interesting. You think about it. I didn't test it yet, but I would like to see like a 390 or a 290X with 4 gigs of memory instead of 8 gigs of memory. And see if maybe something about that architecture, the way it compresses, maybe the memory usage is a little bit too high at these settings. It's really interesting that it showed up in the Nano and the Fury X, but not in the R9 390. And you can see that again here in this frame variance graph, where the black line of the Nano kind of spikes up at like the 92nd percentile, really, while even the orange line of the 390 is down there with the same minimal variance of the 980. At 4K, this occurs again, as you would expect, except again, the R9 390 does not have those spikes. But frame rates are particularly low at 4K. Here's the screenshot I wanted to click on. This is a 4K screenshot, and this is actually like a screenshot. It's not like a...
Yeah, that's what we saw on the screen.
Yeah, it's not like a painting. It's not like a pre-rendered. It looks this good in... This looks a little bit better than in motion because you get a little bit of like... You know, texture flicker or whatever it is, you know, a little aliasing. But this is a screenshot from the game. This is not like something I took from their website. I took this screenshot while playing at 4K. It is stunning looking. The animation is fantastic.
You know, like that is the environment that moves around.
Yep. Oops. Okay, I don't know what I'm doing here. So it's pretty impressive to see how this all looks, honestly. Performance-wise, the 980 Ti looks like it's the best card for this game for right now. Closely followed by the Fury X if they can figure out those kind of frame rate issues. Those frame spikes. Yeah, frame time spikes. But you're going to need some GPU horsepower to play. It's at very high settings. Obviously, you can drop down the image quality settings and you'll get better performance. But this game is no slouch. And if you want a game that looks better than its console brethren, this is going to be an option for you guys to check out. So it's a fun game for the few hours I did play it, and it looks pretty good at the same time. All right, let's move on and talk about the exact opposite of Tomb Raider performance. We're going to talk about the performance of SSDs.
Yeah, buddy.
So I don't know exactly what started this conversation, I guess, that we had. I don't know if we saw the motherboard first or whatever, or...
The beginning of the conversation really started when we saw the first Z170 stuff. And we saw how the layout of that architecture was so that you could replace SATA ports with up to 3 M.2 PCIe by 4 ports.
Right.
And the initial thought was like, hey, that'd be pretty cool if you can do like triple M.2 on a board.
Yep.
But, of course, that was when we first looked at it, which was months ago. And there was no such thing. And then, I think it was Ken saw... like, hey, Gigabyte's making a triple M.2
So we
board.
saw this motherboard, the Gigabyte Z170X SoC Force, that, and for all intents and purposes, is just a high-end, like almost $400 motherboard, right?
Yeah, there are some other boards that have triple M.2 that are lower cost.
Are
This
there?
is the first one that we came across.
This is the first one that we saw that we were able to get.
Yeah.
So you can see in this shot that there are 3 M.2 SSDs installed in that perfect gap between all of the PCI Express slots.
Yeah, it's like that gap was designed for that.
Yeah.
Honestly.
So
It's pretty cool.
that's pretty cool looking. We did a video on this as well. So what we're looking at is essentially a system. It's a Z170 system, so it's not a X99 Haswell E platform, which
Right.
in theory would be better with the additional PCI Express lanes that it has.
Kind of.
Okay, well, we can talk about that as we go through this.
Yeah.
But here's our test bed that we were running it on. 3 of those boards. We had a 970 in it. A 6700K processor. Nothing's outside of the realm of what you could actually buy and install into these platforms. Now, what's interesting is, so this diagram is basically showing us how the layout of these motherboards works, right? So
This is C170 chipset general.
the processor only has 16 lanes of PCI Express 3 coming out of it. Then almost all of that goes toward, pretty much all goes to GPUs.
Actually, I think it's 20.
No, it's 16.
Oh, okay.
It's 16. But what happens is the chipset has 4 more,
Yeah.
right? So in theory, you could get 20 more. But like the chipset has this internal bandwidth, HSIO lane assignments. Although, is that E supposed to be in there?
E, where are you?
Assign E-mints in there. Do you see that? You see that in there with the E there? I don't know. But as you have seen if you've bought any motherboard recently, is sometimes when you enable a feature or take advantage of a feature, it will disable other parts of the board.
Yes.
Right? So, I'm using one M.2 slot, so I lose 2 SATA ports. Okay, and that trade-off is usually worthwhile based on what your performance measurements are. But when you're doing 3 M.2,
You're going to lose something.
you're going to lose a lot, as it turns out, right? What do we end up losing on this
Well,
platform?
actually, in this case, I believe you only end up losing the 6 Intel SATA ports.
so you lose a total of 6 SATA ports.
There are 8
on
total
this.
because there's an ASMedia chipset on this board.
That's
and-
probably on purpose.
Well, most boards, especially $400 boards, will have an extra
True.
controller. Like pretty much all of them now, right? And if you're doing triple M.2 RAID, you really don't need to connect 6 SATA SSDs for your OS to use.
No.
Either, so you can kind of get away with having less SATA ports in that case. And
Right.
the way that Gigabyte laid it out on this board, there's actually 2 ways that you can do it.
Okay.
The first 2 SATAs can be grouped so that by putting in, like, say, that middle one, you will suck up 4 SATAs.
okay.
Okay? And it makes more sense to do that. I think every board we've looked at has done it that way because then you can have, say, a board has one M.2 slot. You can make it so that that's the slot taking up the left lanes.
Right.
And that way you can have an M.2 SSD installed using 4 lanes of PCI and still have all 6 SATA.
Gotcha.
Right. Which is good, right? And that's what Gigabyte did here, so that you have the option to use one of those 3 slots. You have to be careful which one you pick. But if you pick the right one,
It affects things, which one
it does
you
affect
pick.
things,
Yeah.
But if you pick the right one, you will still have all 6 Intel SATA ports if you need them.
I will say that needs to be a much more obvious process.
It's documented in the manual for the
Kind
board.
of.
No, it
But
tells
it's like
you.
in a table.
There's a
right?
table, the
It should be.
tables-
It should be in the UEFI. It should be in a There should be when you turn on your freaking system and you go to
Yeah,
the BIOS. There should be
yeah.
a picture of all the ports and available connectivity options. There should be like a little diagram that says, "Hey, if you install this, these things go red because you're not going to be able to access those." Why that doesn't exist is kind of beyond me.
I don't know.
Why it's a sign of this why do I have to look at this table and somehow decipher it?
You really do. In the BIOS, you have no idea. Like, it even still shows you you can configure hot plug on or off for all 6 ports, even though you know that they're all off.
4 are disabled, or yes, all of them are disabled.
in our case, they were all
and that's
off.
stupid.
And we still had the options there.
Right.
Like, you would think that you still had those ports if you didn't know any
Yep,
better.
agreed.
Yeah, if only they designed some sort of graphical BIOS interface we could use.
Yeah.
It'd be nice.
Yeah. Like UEFI or something.
Yeah, that might be an idea.
There was, I thought there was something like I've seen it in some BIOSes where it like shows which memory slots are populated or
Sure.
which
info's
graphics
there.
cards are populated.
Yeah.
I would like to. There's all kinds of things that they should be adding
That's-
to this,
that's the
like little
next step.
LEDs that show things. But yeah, anyway, go
That's
ahead.
the next step for this. But so this is different from even normal, like what you might be used to if you just did Intel RST SATA stuff, like RAIDs.
Yeah.
Because the console to configure is not like hit tab or hit control I during boot kind of a thing to configure your RAID. It's
Right.
in the BIOS itself, right? So you can go in there. Each board tends to have its own trick. So for this one, we had to like disable CSM. We had to
Right,
flip
yeah, I
another
see that
switch.
there.
And then once we flipped those switches, and it was in the manual now, which was much better. Like the Asus board, we had to like actually call them up.
Right.
Like, hey, like we don't know how to turn this on. So it was in the manual. We'll follow those steps, reboot it again, and then poof, we had like Intel RST options in the BIOS. The other thing to note is that you're going to have a Windows installer if you're installing from USB. Now's the time where you're going to have to make that thing GPT partitioned for UEFI BIOS.
Right
You can't
here.
use like if you're using Rufus, you can't use the default, which is like MBR for BIOS or UEFI CSM. Like you can't because you have in this case you have to disable CSM to even get RST to work. So you're stuck in a catch-22. If you re-enable it to see the USB device to install Windows, your array goes away. So
Yeah.
you only get one or the other, right? So
Another thing that could be more easily explained and like
I really wish it was.
'Cause I
Because
mean, I
it's
wouldn't
still
have known to
not.
do this.
Yeah, it's still not explained. That's why I specifically added
Yeah.
that to the article because
Yeah.
you just something you got to know.
So if you do all that and you go in, you install Windows to it, like any other Windows 10 installation process, and then you get this inside Windows, right? You get your volume
Yeah,
management. like
once
you
once you're in
normally would get.
Windows, you have to install the RST like Windows version,
right?
right? Because the thing you would install just to get Windows onto it would be like the floppy version of the driver. So once you're in Windows, you have to do like the real install of RST, and then you can get a console. And also if you're using the array as a secondary array, which is
Yep.
how it was configured here, you could go all the way into Windows without installing the driver,
Right.
and then install RST, and then your PCI stuff will pop up. And it is interesting to be able to create and destroy and rearrange PCIe RAIDs within the OS without rebooting. That's just pretty cool.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of underlying mechanics that has to happen there to make that just work. And it does.
Cool.
So we had no issues.
So, quick results here.
Are you ready for the cat tax first?
The what? Oh.
The cat tax.
Hello, cat.
Wow.
This would be the latest addition to the family.
Oh,
see.
you got another animal?
And it's showing you its butt.
Well, it is a cat.
Well,
after all.
yes, it's a cat.
Yeah.
Hey, everybody, look
Rainy.
at my butt.
That's pretty funny.
What's
Look at me.
What's his name or her name?
All right. Rainy.
He or her?
She
Okay.
was dropped off in front of somebody's house in a rainstorm.
Yeah. That's how usually you end up with like the
100 cats?
stray cats
Yeah.
in the rain crying at the back door.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
why I call my
anyway.
friends like Josh. I say, please come take this cat.
Yep.
All right. So,
All right. So
what are these? These are results that people will immediately know and understand.
Yeah. So first we did just simple rounds of Addo, and the thing you notice almost immediately is that a single 950 Pro is running, at least on reads, pretty close to the bottleneck that you run into with DMI. Because if you look
DMI being
between
the interface between the chipset and the processor.
the chipset and the CPU,
Yeah.
that's going to be your bottleneck once you start piling more PCIe SSDs behind the chipset. So as you can tell from the green lines on Addo, if you look between like the first, single drive and double, it doesn't double, right? The writes double, but the reads don't because they're hitting the max, basically.
Right.
They're hitting the chipset maximum. And then if you go from 2 to 3, you don't really see much more of an advantage,
Right.
actually. Really not much anywhere, at least in Addo.
Right. And then you do show a RAID 5 here just because people will always ask about this.
Yeah, because they just for anybody's curious how RAID 5 would perform on this
And
particular
that's
thing.
kind of sexy.
What, that it does RAID 5?
And decent.
Yeah,
decent
yeah, and
read
does
speeds.
and it does well. Yeah, it gives you at least 2 SSDs worth of performance and reads.
Here's our kind of standard iometer,
Yep.
IOPS
And here's
scaling.
that's
right?
the typical kind of thing you would see like in the way we used to review these, with just the IOPS scaling as you ramp up Q depth. And even if you look there, like Q depth all the way up to 8, like there really isn't much difference. Even at 16, they're all kind of really close to each other as far as the IOPS you're getting. If you look at writes, it's a little bit different because you are actually limited by the SSDs more in writes.
Right.
And even though
Correct.
yeah,
Sorry.
even though in Addo it looked like there wasn't much of a difference between 2 and 3 drives, here you can tell that there is a difference once you get, especially as you ramp up the queue. So that kind of gives you like the thing that people will tend to talk about and dismiss Z170 RAID for PCI stuff. They're like, oh, you hit a bottleneck like immediately.
Right. Add the
But-
second drive in.
Yeah, second drive, and you're already limited. You're already not using all of the bandwidth, at least on reads. Like, why would I want to do that? And the thing you have to consider is not everything an SSD is sequential performance
Right.
at all, really. Most of what your OS does is going to be like random access. Random reads, random writes.
So this gets into your next page of results where you're looking at latency percentiles.
Yes.
I will say that if we talked about this for about 15 minutes in a video that you can read a video that you could watch on this story, as in addition to reading the actual story.
Yeah, there's a whole lot of info
So I don't want to
there.
spend the exact same 15 minutes
No.
talking about it here.
The gist of it is,
Yeah.
you can distribute load across multiple SSDs in a RAID, generally, right? And what you can see in the charts that are in the article on page 4 is if you look at a single SSD, like as you load it more, as you have higher Q on it, the latencies tend to climb up.
Right.
And we're showing like how those latencies climb up, like what they actually look like, as opposed to just putting like an average, which is what everybody has only had access to in the past.
Sure.
You'd only have an average and a maximum, right? But obviously having these kind of profiles gives you the whole story on what that latency profile looks like. So you can see what that looks like, but then as you add drives and you put the same load on them, or at least the same queue depth, that latency profile gets much narrower, much tighter, and all the IOs are being responded to with less of a variance in time, just like frame rating, right?
Right. So we talked about it as like, this is similar to what the frame rating methodology was for graphics performance testing. This is kind of similar to that in terms of storage performance testing, because you are not, you're paying attention to not just the raw throughput, aka average frame rate over a test.
Yep. In this case, like average IOPS or average
right,
latency.
but now you're actually measuring each individual IO, just like we measure each individual frame time.
Yep.
And you look for things that stand out in that data.
Yep.
This is very different than anything that has been done before, anything that we've written about before, or testing methodology done before. Even though it is very much like frame rating, is very dense. If you don't have a background in what the topics are, it can be hard to understand at first.
Which is why we try to, there's a whole bunch of words around those charts.
There are words around charts, and like you said, there's a video embedded in the story as well where we talk about these charts very specifically.
Yep. But the short version of it is, even though you're bottlenecked even after just one drive, as far as maximum throughput goes, we saw very large differences in the testing we did as far as the latency differences when you add drives,
right?
Which equates to, just the system will behave much snappier. Like if you can respond to IOs that much faster, it all depends on what kind of stuff the computer's doing with those. But if it's something where it has to ask for something and then do something with that information before it asks for the next thing,
right?
Like those all stack on each other. So the latency of each one counts, right? And not only that, but just adding the drives to it, just by the fact that you can get more IOPS out of all the drives, means that, if a game was only going to ask for so many IOPS of the drives, the latency would actually end up, the queue depth would actually end up even lower than just by dividing across the drives. It would push it even lower because the game or the thing is only asking for so many per second anyway.
That would be unchanged. The workload goes down. Yeah.
So it builds on itself, right? So the latency drops even lower. So that's good, right? It's like the lower latency, the snappier it is. Like it's closer to just acting as if the thing was already in memory, basically.
Right.
The lower latency you can go, the better. So yeah, it's
really cool stuff. I encourage you guys to go read in particular that page, and then watch the video where Alan and I discuss the testing and what it shows and how it benefits. But before we leave this story, I did want to point out this picture that shows the thermal impact of these. Like, this looks pretty interesting, especially since we see the white hot area that is the controller there. Is this affecting power consumption or heat in your system? Is this a concern if somebody wanted to do something crazy like this?
I mean, these drives use 6 watts max.
Oh,
each.
Okay.
So you're drawing a whopping 18 watts if you're actually taxing all 3 at the same time.
But they're very point dependent on where those 6 watts are delivered.
Oh yeah. A lot of it is at the controller, but we had no airflow going across that test bed, and we actually had a water cooler on the CPU with the fan not even.
So that's kind of worst case.
That's just stale air sitting there and it's not even that test bed was sitting flat horizontal. So the air isn't even rising across.
Somebody in the chat asks where the graphics card was. For this particular, in order to do that, we use the onboard graphics of the processor. To do that. Yeah.
Yep. I didn't want even a GPU cooler to be messing with airflow or anything there. Yeah. And that was with a pretty good load running on the SSDs continuously. And the max temperature there was 153.
This is 153 Fahrenheit.
So they don't
That's
throttle.
Not that bad.
They don't throttle till around 170, 180.
Yeah.
So
and somebody's asking would a graphics card on top of that top one affect it? And you would think
it depends on the graphics card.
It depends on the graphics card, because if you have a blower style, I would think it would kind of create a stale air underneath it.
Because the bottom part of a blower style just doesn't have.
It has no airflow. If you have regular fans on it, you would think that it's kind of creating air movement around it.
And it does.
Also consider you're going to have it in a case. There's going to be airflow that you're normally pushing across a video card anyway. So but there's going to be
the bigger point for that is where that same kind of load applied to a single 950 just sitting would probably start to throttle.
Right.
But in that configuration, they didn't because all 3 drives were just
interesting.
loaded much less, right? So
Interesting.
it's like just much harder to get them to thermally throttle because, again, you're distributing the load so that they're taking less power on
Right.
each one.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, before we wander off into Josh Tech land,
Uh-oh.
you'd alluded that there was a reason that the Z170 would be a better choice than the X99,
Okay.
even with those gobs of PCI Express lanes.
True.
So here's the thing. Currently, the only way you can raid PCIe natively, or kind of natively, is by using RST-E, which is Enterprise Edition RST.
Which
And
is the Intel software
Intel
tool.
software, and you have to have, I think, a C600 chipset, which is I think what X99 is kind of using for that, isn't it? Or something?
Yeah, it's a derivative of that's branded differently. Yes.
Right. I
Yeah.
mean, we used RSTE on an X99 chipset in the past to
Yep.
test, and
Yep.
it worked. Here's the thing, though. You can't boot from that, at least as it exists right now.
Okay.
You can't boot from it.
Yeah.
So don't expect to be able to boot from a PCIe RAID under X99 anytime, probably on that chipset ever. I don't think it's going to be a thing.
Right.
Also, you don't have a chipset. You don't have chipset hardware helping you do any of the work for the RAID. Okay, so for like the RAID we tested on C170, there is a layer there in the chipset that handles distributing those IOs to the multiple devices. That's why you're able to configure the RAID in the BIOS without an operating system.
Okay.
Right? That's why you're able to boot from it, because it's able to talk to those drives before you even get into an OS. So the CPU does no work for that. Right? It's just like the chipset just handles that. There is still a little bit of overhead for CPU, but it's not that much. On X99, when we did some testing on that, it was like twice as much overhead because the CPU was doing all of the work because all of the lanes from those PCIe
Interesting.
devices go straight to the CPU. There's no way for anything to help it, right? So it's basically driver level software RAID for RSTE under X99.
Does that explain things, Jeremy? Okay, good.
He was muted or something?
He was muted.
He
It's
didn't
fine.
say anything, but
He,
he's...
it was
I was drooling over Ken's beer menu.
Oh,
Oh.
okay. Yeah, so that's the story for that. I mean, there
Okay.
might be another thing coming later where they add another,
Right.
version of that. But for right now, Z170 is going to be the better way to raid them for like a consumer.
gotcha. All right, let's
Why does
go ahead.
one of your drives not look like the other in that picture?
Oh, because one of them was the review sample.
Oh, I see.
They all have the same firmware on them. Just I guess there's different labels on the retail ones.
Yep.
I do like that they actually have 950 Pro written on the top of them now.
So you can actually see it.
Because it was like they actually did have like that same kind of a logo on a separate little sticker on the back of the review sample, which I thought made no sense.
Right.
So yeah.
All right, let's talk with Josh if we have to.
Me.
We're going to quickly talk about what AMD brought forth in their kind of little AMD Q1 product refresh. Now, this is APUs and CPUs and coolers, not GPUs, guys. So understand that as we go into it.
Yeah.
Hello, Kat.
Yeah, Kat jumped onto the back of my chair because she was lonely.
Was she lonely, Josh, or
I could be lonely too, but
It's like
So lonely.
thank you, Master,
he
for
actually?
taking me in out
Had
of
I
the
looked
rain.
at it, he was like motioning the cat over. Please. Come
oh yeah,
here, please come."
yeah, because cats listen to.
I like how the cat is completely just
Tell them to
like
do.
just like just like looking around.
It's so interesting here.
What do you got going on that screen there, buddy? Hey,
Yeah.
Look, it's me.
Hey, it's a handsome cat right there. Anyway, let's
Calicos.
talk about AMD Q1 stuff. What's
All right,
what's
there have been
interesting?
multiple things that they have released. There were 3 new CPUs, APUs. The A10 7860K,
Yep.
which is a Godavari based solution, which kind of is like a very, but a little bit more optimized. So it's full 4 roller cores, so 2 modules, 8 GPU cores. This is kind of interesting. The 7850K runs at 3.7 gigahertz to 4.0 gigahertz. Now, if you notice, the 7860K, which is a higher number, has a base clock that is 100 megahertz lower at 3.6 gigahertz. However, the GPU frequency over the 7850K is much higher. It's like 120 megahertz.
Okay.
The biggest deal here, the
biggest one.
7850K is a 95 watt TDP part. This is a 65 watt. So they've done some kind of tweaking on the process and the firmware and microcode and whatnot. And they've gotten that down to 65 watts, running mostly at the same speed with a higher GPU speed. So that's
cool.
A positive thing.
Yeah.
The second one, the 7470K, one module, 2 cores, GPU cores cut down half. It goes back to the 3.7 to 4.0. GPU frequency up quite a bit higher. And again, is a 65 watt part. But they cut the L2 cache down. And the price is like $60. It's really just dirt cheap for something that's going to game well for you in, League of Legends, Dota 2, that kind of stuff. But yeah, it's really dirt cheap. And probably the final and more interesting one is the Athlon X4 845. This is the first desktop excavator-based CPU out there. Now, it has the graphics portion chopped off. It's a 65 watt part, but it runs at 3.5 gigahertz to 3.8 gigahertz. AMD claims that there is IPC, instructions per clock, improvements with Excavator over Steamroller. So potential is there to have, about the speed of a 7860K, but a lot cheaper and with no GPU. And again, 65 watts. It's got half the cache, but that's not as big of a deal because AMD really designed around that. The cache is typically one of the more expensive portions when it comes to power and heat on a CPU. So they cut that in half, and they also, if you notice, they have far fewer PCI Express 3.0 lanes.
Right.
The thing about this is it's obviously one of the mobile parts that did not yield or bin how they wanted it to, but they're still able to get it to run at a good enough pace that they can do it to the desk. Now, this is a $69.99 part.
Ooh, that's cheap.
And it's kind of interesting.
That is
And
inexpensive.
certainly, it is inexpensive. And, certainly from people who like to experiment and dig into things, this would be an interesting part to see exactly how much of an IPC improvement we have, what other kind of features they have, how well does it utilize that 2 megs L2 cache, and what kind of effect will just having a buy 8 PCI Express 3.0 have on somebody building a low-end gaming machine. So these are all good questions to have. And again, it's probably the most interesting part of this entire release.
Now they also talked about some motherboard updates. This is something we talked about during our CES talk a lot, where there are a handful of boards coming out, AM3 plus, FM2 plus, that have what are they adding? Like USB 3.1, M.2,
M.2 SATA.
Yeah.
And so there's multiple.
Wait, did you say is it SATA?
What?
Oh, it is SATA. Yeah.
M.2 SATA.
M.2 SATA.
That's still a thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, it's better than SATA.
And I think that there's the Gigabyte is a NVMe based product.
What is
so
that? What do you mean?
Supports that, I think.
Oh, not on the M.2. You just mean
What's the issue?
No, it's an M.2 NVMe on the Gigabyte G1.
Oh, you think they have
Yep.
PCI Express based NVMe? Huh.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I mean, it's all PCI Express based, period. But the thing is that it's PCIe 2.0 rather than 3.0.
Well, this M.2 SATA is not PCIe.
Yeah, it's not.
Right? If it says M.2
Well, no,
SATA,
it's M.2 SATA connectors. Several of them are M.2 period, and do support NVMe,
Okay.
like the Gigabyte G1 Gaming.
So it's just a wording.
Because you can have
complication.
M.2 ports
Yeah.
that can go both ways. Actually,
Oh, they do.
yeah, they have to be wired properly, but they can.
But you would think you would point those out more explicitly because
should.
that's a much better, newer, modern thing.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, all
Yeah.
right. Anyway, we talked about some of that there. We also talked about the Wraith cooler.
Wraith cooler.
From CES. It's cool. I have one
very
here. I just
exciting.
haven't had a chance to really write anything up on it yet, but it works. It's quiet. It's extremely quiet.
That's good.
This
cool
is.
things.
Did they say officially this is the car or the cooler that's going to come with Zen?
they
Nope.
were at least hinting at it, right?
I thought they
And
were.
they don't know. Who knows? Who knows what kind
I
of
mean, it's a
TDP
95
Zen
watt
comes
cooler.
in at.
That's a little overkill for Zen, isn't it?
Maybe.
Maybe. It's a 125 watt cooler. So who knows? They've also got a APU smaller 65 to 95 watt
Yep.
cooler that they've kind of made like the Wraith, except not nearly as exciting.
Yeah.
It's better than the current stuff, which is always a big plus. They're cutting prices a little bit, so you can get the Wraith with the 8370 for $199. Just a regular FX 8370 for $189, which is a $10 difference. They don't list things
how
like
math
the
works.
8350, which is $179, which would still be my first choice because you really don't gain a whole lot of speed with the 8370.
Right.
Yeah. So it's going to be interesting to see the X4 870K versus the X4 845.
Yeah.
Well,
I don't
to get
know.
some of those and see.
Yeah, I mean, a $69 processor sounds pretty interesting in a lot of ways, regardless of what it is. Like, I'd like to see what that performance kind of goes into. I did look through Sebastian's piece from last year where he looked at like CPU scaling and versus GPU scaling in like 5-6 different games or something like that.
Yeah.
With all those GPUs and processors.
I remember that.
In the predecessor to the X845, the X4 840 did not do particularly well in that testing. It was below the i3 in terms of performance on gaming.
Yeah.
But it is $69. So there's that. Right? If you could build a system, you can build a system. I don't know what else to say.
Don't expect any miracle,
No,
but at least it'll work.
I agree.
Yeah.
Let's touch on, real quickly, Scott posted an editorial with the title, "What's the point of Steam OS?" And he put it in quotes, which means it's not his question. It's a question from an Ars Technica UK published editorial, where the person is basically, as Scott says here, that story mostly rants about technical problems with the Zotac review unit, but the headline is interesting nonetheless, basically calling out that person. But he goes through some of the details of why Steam OS exists, why it was created. I think there's a lot of debate out there about like, oh, it was built when Windows 8 and the Windows App Store were going to kill everything. Windows 10 came out now, and they have kind of like backed off almost completely on the App Store side of things.
Yeah.
And killed Media Center.
And killed Media Center. So, does SteamOS need to exist now? Still, kind of?
I wish I hadn't killed Media Center.
Well,
Me too. I still haven't taken the Hopog capture card out of my system.
I'm still running a Media Center
Hoping
PC.
it comes.
I built a Media Center PC after they stopped supporting it.
yeah.
Oh, okay.
So it's actually a really good editorial here, and he goes into kind of how the Media Center stuff works into it. What if it competed with the Windows Store instead of competing as an operating system? I think that's makes more sense. We still have not seen the pickup of SteamOS the way 2 CESs ago we maybe expected or thought that they would have.
Yeah.
But it's kind of interesting to think about. I should maybe build another SteamOS system in the near term and see if anything has changed in that ecosystem at all. Setup process, game availability. Are some of the newer titles actually available and any of that stuff yet? I don't really know. So check out that editorial that Scott wrote up. It's worth reading. The next thing I want to do is I want to talk about the EVGA contest that we ran. We have winners. They are
Did I
picked.
win?
You did not win again.
Why not? I gave away a prize. I should get a prize.
Listen, we saw
You're-
we saw you register your cat. And,
Your prize.
She's a really cute cat.
Your prize is
Rainy-
the benefit of continuing to be on the podcast and
that's
you
true.
know,
Fine.
working and stuff. The winners. Let's see. That's not posted on the page for some reason. I thought it would be. Robert N. from Mashpee, Massachusetts. Is that MA? No. MA is Massachusetts?
MA? I think so.
Maine
Who
is
else would
ME.
Name a town mash P.
I didn't.
Mississippi is MS.
What's Missouri?
MS.
Well, what's Mississippi?
MI.
Oh yeah,
There's a lot of states that start with M.
that's true.
Nathan H. from Palm Harbor, Florida, and Josh H. Wait a minute. Josh
Wait a
H.
minute.
from Beaverton, Oregon. So unless you
I do not
also
live
have
in Oregon.
unless you have a secondary address in Beaverton, so congratulations to those people. I don't have the order written down of who won what. One of you won an EVGA 750G2 power supply. One of you won an EVGA Z170 FTW motherboard, and the other a GTX 970 SSC gaming. Thank you to EVGA for supporting us with that contest, and we have another one. Probably it's going to start before the end of the week. Another contest as well. So just keep checking out PCPro.com. That's where all the cool guys go for their contests. So let's get to a handful of news items.
It wasn't Marvin the winner of the wheel? Marvin from Texas.
Marvin from Texas. I checked. It's not super close to Maury, so I don't think Maury was cheating again.
Oh, good.
This was like in an outskirt of Houston, pretty close to the Texas Louisiana state line.
Okay.
So there's that. Let's get to a handful of news items here before we wrap up this show. We're going to talk about Gigabyte releasing an update to their Z170 motherboards that basically fixes Skylake. Is that right, Jeremy?
Yeah, so you may have heard a news story a little while ago on our page about Skylake sort of just stopping dead when running a Mercian Prime distributed computing or occasionally Prime 95. It didn't seem to happen much when you were gaming, but it certainly happened when you're doing hardcore number crunching. And Intel sort of came out and said it's honestly not us. And the fact that an updated UEFI has fixed the problem completely does sort of lend credence to that. So Gigabyte was the first to come out. Anyone that's running a Skylake processor that's interested in that or just likes to know their processor isn't going to stop dead if you ask it a really tough math question, go pop over, pick up the update, and hey, you might even get some bonus performance out of it because we all like BIOS updates now that they don't brick systems all the time.
I would say the fact that it's a BIOS update doesn't necessarily mean that it's not Intel's fault. Also, Intel provides a base level for BIOS code that all the guys based on. So it's still Intel's fault regardless. It would be impossible that all of the developers independently made the same error. All the motherboard manufacturers, I guess, independently made the same error. And I think this is something we've seen before, Josh, as well, where if you have a hardware level bug in your product, you can fix it in BIOS by kind of bypassing it or changing the way that calculation is done, something like that, right?
Well, you can do
To a certain degree. I mean, you can change some microcode in there
Yeah.
and do some workarounds. But that would be some stuff that you require an OS update as well.
microcode actually gets like sent to the CPU during boot.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
But
So
it's
the
not
BIOS
quite
has
like
it.
FDiv level.
Yeah, it's like a volatile firmware update for the CPU.
What interesting stuff we could do with that. Interesting. All right. Next story up here is you guys might remember a fellow by the name of Jim Keller. Hey, hit
Sounds
that button
familiar.
there. He designed processors for AMD, and then he left.
And
Yeah.
then he came back.
He went to
then
Apple
left
for a
again.
little while, right?
Okay. What do you do there?
Probably designed GPUs.
Oh, okay.
Would be my guess.
Not GPUs, no, but A9, A8.
Yeah, not GPUs. Sorry, yes, that's processor side. So now he works at Tesla. I don't know what to say about that, right? Like,
Maybe the graphics in your Tesla will go faster.
Well, he's a CPU guy, not a GPU guy.
Oh.
So to correct myself.
Self-driving.
So
He is doing big stuff in the self-driving and figuring out the SoCs and what kind of hardware you need to do that effectively, and maybe even possibly using NVIDIA parts.
So here's what's interesting. Do we think that Tesla is buying up people like Keller to just evaluate hardware and help pick the right stuff? Or is Tesla going to do what Apple did and design their own SoCs to put into their cars and platforms to do the self-driving?
I would see them doing the first.
Everybody thought that with Apple, I guess, too, for a while.
Yeah, but they're
I
selling
guess.
millions and millions of products. Do you think Tesla is selling millions and millions of products?
I mean, they're
to be able
clearly
to-
not.
It's not cost effective for them yet.
Yeah.
For Tesla to do that yet. But they do need a guy that can
But
pick
what?
that
But
stuff
what if
intelligently.
Tesla has a deal or relationship with somebody like Ford, or somebody who is going to somebody who says we're going to partner with Tesla to do all of our self-driving car stuff into the future?
Okay, how about something like this?
Okay, go for it.
Guy who can take a multitude of processors and get them to communicate with each other effectively. These are off-the-shelf products, and to do it in a way that will facilitate the development of...
I just don't think you need a guy like Jim Keller to do that.
Yeah, seems
I don't know. That's
overqualified.
pretty complex. I mean, especially when you
To get
consider...
SoCs to talk to each other?
Okay. Think of entire thing. You've got multiple SoCs doing many things, and you have to integrate them all together to get a functioning whole. And I think that's,
Yeah.
because you got visual stuff, you've got radar, you've got...
The biggest complication I can think of where you'd need someone that really knows their stuff to accomplish that is because all of that stuff is not like a typical computer. All of that stuff is a real-time thing. All of those
Stuck
events,
in Josh's functional hole.
like all of those events are happening real time.
Yeah.
It can't, like, one can't take too long and stall other ones and stuff like that.
This is, I mean,
He's a
yes, all of this is
engineer.
correct, but it's not something that people aren't already doing,
Yeah, I guess.
I guess. Like, if you look at it, if you look at what NVIDIA announced at CES with their whole Pascal-based drive system, was a Drive PX2 or whatever the hell it was, there's a company that has all of the SoC stuff they claim it's necessary for self-driving and deep neural networks and all that crap working in one box already. Here you go. Why do you need somebody like Jim Keller to go, that one?
They might need to make like one custom thing to ties all the stuff together that's on a chip,
Sure.
and he would be a good guy to do that because he already knows about all the other things he's tying together.
I just don't see how you get a guy who designed. Did he do the K7, Josh? That's right.
DEC stuff. Yeah,
Okay.
I think he was architect K7, and then he laid out
So you get the guy
the
who.
architects for AMD 64, but
Oh,
he didn't
okay.
work on K8.
Okay. But you get the guy who did that and then who made the first two Apple SoCs.
Yeah.
Okay. And then he came back to AMD and he was designing the Zen architecture. And then you go to Tesla
Yeah, I don't know.
to do what? Like to be a part picker? It just doesn't make any sense to me unless they are
Maybe-
building something.
maybe he just
or
wants
you're
free
just
cars.
or you're just Elon Musk and you're a crazy guy
Maybe-
and you're just
maybe
like
he's
I want the
doing
very
some
best
Tesla
people
stuff.
to do the pick.
I mean,
He's
maybe they're
doing
just
some Tesla stuff, and then he's moving on to some SpaceX.
maybe.
He could be designing processors across all of Elon Musk's crazy adventures.
Yeah,
The Hyperloop needs a processor. SpaceX needs processors.
I don't think the Hyperloops.
You need processors. You're gonna have to manage all these mag crap, right? Otherwise, you're just
yeah.
gonna plow into a wall at 900
Processors all
miles
the way
an hour.
down, man.
CPUs all the way down. I don't know. I like I said, other than this crazy photo that Scott likes to use anytime we mention something with Jim in it.
he's judo chopping
Right.
the competition.
Hercules never knew judo.
It's just an interesting placement for me. I'm very curious to see what he does. Or maybe he just has like this huge background in software and he's like, I know how to manage self-driving.
Or maybe he's making a custom ASIC that will just integrate all of the external SoCs into one easily accessible thing.
Yeah, that's what I was saying.
Low latency performance and communication between them all.
in one package.
Just the interface.
Well, maybe
to
not
of
all 17 SoCs in a Tesla. The One Ring to rule them
Right,
all.
right.
Jim Keller is creating it.
Yeah. Real quick, Tim posted this up as well. AMD Fire Pro S Series introduces hardware-based GPU virtualization. I thought this was a thing that was already out, but is it not? Like actual full-on scale GPU virtualization?
Yeah, but it's competing with Grid.
Yeah.
I think so.
Right, so you can reserve chunks of memory and processing power for numerous users.
Right.
So it's a market that's sort of opened up, and it makes sense that they put something out branded specifically at it, even if there is hardware that can sort of do it already.
It says that the Fire Pro S Series allows virtual machines direct access to the full range of GPU hardware, shaders, memory, etc., and OpenCL 2.0 support on the software side. The S1750 supports up to 16 simultaneous users, and the S1750 X2 tops out at 32 users. Go figure. Each virtual machine is allocated an equal slice of the GPU, and as you add virtual machines, the equal slices get smaller. Maybe that... I remember talks about this. I remember that this was like the thing that was going to happen, but I guess I thought it had already been implemented. Maybe it hadn't been implemented at this kind of level yet. I don't know. Graphics card uses EC memory. Yeah, there you go. And, okay. Hey, great. Fantastic. Now everybody can virtualize their system. This is more for an enterprise level type thing anyway. Jeremy, tell me about changes to Fallout, if you don't mind. Apparently there was a big update to the game that changed some graphical features.
Yeah, the day after Kyle and the crew at Hard OCP just did a review on a certain game.
That sucks.
Sort of just like happened to you.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it allowed HBAO Plus to all GPU users, and it'll add some specific NVIDIA features for weapon debris effects. But the other thing they did is troll through a bunch of the Nexus mods that exist, which anyone who plays Skyrim is going to recognize in a second. So these are all of the texture packs, the 2K texture packs, the 4K texture packs, which, if you look through the screenshots, are going to make this the next Skyrim where you load 837 different mods into it, and it's going to make a difference. Like, some of the screenshots that they do, you can see a huge difference in everything. Like, those are probably the 4K ones. And they did a bit of testing, and so if you're going to go with the 2K or the 4K at about 1080p, you're good with 4 gigs of memory. If you're going to try and do that at 1440p or higher, well, you better have a lot of GDDR on your hands. But they talk through how to load all of these, how to get them playing together well, and it's a way that Fallout 4 is going to stay alive for quite a while, because when did Skyrim come out?
Geez, 2011, I think?
Right, and people are still demanding benchmarks with a giant list of mods.
Yeah, they do.
But you look at the wood textures; it looks a bit different now, doesn't it?
Yeah, that looks pretty good. Yeah, some of the changes are like just different based on my eye, and some of them are vastly improved.
Yeah, and they go through the ones that will add seasons to your experience, add proper nice storms to it, because it is, after all,
very cool.
Post-nuclear winter.
Well, sure.
So it's neat to give a look over, especially if you haven't really dealt with Nexus Mod and their mod manager and are a little bit scared about dipping into this, because
it's cool. I'm going to check that out.
Worth it.
That's pretty cool. Good on Hard OCP for doing that. Neat stuff. Let's see what else we got. OCZ launches the Tryon 150 here, Alan, the successor to the Tryon 100.
Yep, which was a TLC/SLC hybrid, low-cost OCZ SSD.
Other than this fancy white label, what else has changed?
It has smaller flash dies in it,
Okay.
but that's actually about it.
So it says it's using A15
It's
15 nanometer.
now. Yeah.
as opposed to the Tryon 100 used what?
Yeah, actually, the A15 was an error in their press release.
It's
Just 15. It was A19, which was like the second revision, 19 nanometer Toshiba flash.
I see.
Now
okay.
it's just 15.
And what does that buy us?
Honestly, it just buys potentially lower cost. Usually, it buys you negatives. Like
Right. Usually, when you shrink dies on Flash, you lose endurance.
yeah, like your endurance goes down. Sometimes your speed goes down, but they have all of their specs have remained identical, even their endurance specs, which is impressive. So that means Toshiba is basically qualifying this newer Flash like with the same number of write cycles.
Right. Correct. Did it again.
Yeah.
Damn it.
So that's good, but we haven't tested them yet. They're on their way. We'll once we get them in, we'll review them and see how they compare to the last
All
one.
right.
I suspect their SLC caching might be a little bit better because that was what was a little bit like iffy on the
Right.
Tryon 100. But you know, should be pretty decent. I hope they can get the prices down even lower than what the Tryon 100's pricing was because you know anybody else other than Samsung really needs to get their prices down, basically. With Samsung
To compete.
to compete.
Yeah.
Especially on a low cost SSD, which is what this is going for, right?
Right.
Yeah.
All right. Before we get to our hardware software picks of the week, I'm going to give a shout out to a new Patreon contribution that came in while we were recording the podcast from Freebaser, who pledged $6.66.
Wow.
Satan.
I'm not going to argue.
That's the kind of quality backer we need.
That's right. That's right. So you can pledge 3 or 5 or 10 or 20, but you can also pledge your own special amount, like $6.66.
Listen. Even
That's
sacrilegious amounts of money will still go towards the same goal of making our stuff better and
Right.
more.
Oh man, I thought that was pretty good. That's pretty good. Thank you, sir. All right, let's get into our hardware software picks of the week. Up first from me, we have the PV USB audio interface, and this is an interesting device that we actually.
We're using right now.
We're using 2 of them currently, and I may have recommended it like years and years ago, but whatever. This is a USB based audio interface, as it says, that it gives you XLR outputs.
Yep.
Right, it has a switch on the front that you can put it in stereo or mono mode. Then you get 2 outputs. It's called the PV USB-P.
It's just a high quality sound card with XLR out.
Yep, it's
basically.
transformer isolation, ground lifted isolation. It does not come with a USB cable, which I find very annoying.
Does it also?
How many of those do you
XLR?
actually have around your office? Because I've got like 75.
Well,
Of the A to B cables?
Yeah.
those are getting harder and
They're
harder.
harder to
find.
find now.
Harder
Yeah.
to find.
Yeah.
Well,
Josh,
if
let's
you
start
need any, let
stockpiling.
me
I can see
know.
money in our future.
Yeah,
That's true.
Like at home the other day, I tried to use like an external CD drive that I had.
Yeah.
I couldn't find the dang cable.
Yeah, was it an
I
A to a
have
B?
some in
Yeah.
mint condition.
It was A to B, and I didn't have one like anywhere in the house. I was like, oh crap.
So we use this for the purpose we use this for is we have 3 of them hooked up to the streaming machine. Each Skype connection uses one of those as its output sound card,
And that's how we get
and
it
then
into
we
the
get
board.
it into the mixer that
Yeah.
way. And we also I ordered a couple more of them because we used this during our racing live stream because we were tired of the audio interference issues we get from running like a 30-foot
Headphone jack.
headphone cable, essentially, right?
inch.
From the mixer to the device. So we plugged this in to it. Used the left, put it in mono mode. That's the only kind of drawback to it. Although you could do stereo if you want.
Sure.
Out of it, and got like clean
XLR
audio
straight into the board.
Straight into the board.
Yep.
You can convert XLR to quarter inch if you want, right? And these are $50 a piece, and it's just a thing that we just plug in and it works. Windows sees them, it enumerates them correctly with subsequent numbers, which is nice because we have 3 or 4 plugged into a machine.
Yep.
Which is
And the
good.
next thing you know, Grood is lifting you.
That's right.
Grood lifted.
You're right. It's supposed to be ground lifted, but it is Groot.
Okay.
Anyway, Jeremy, what do you got for us?
Well, VR sounds wonderful, and with eValkyrie and Elite Dangerous and that looking like they're going to support it, it's sort of going to be the killer app for these VR goggles. But how in the hell are you supposed to know where your hands are on the joystick when you can't look at them? Well, this guy just,
Sorry, I got to clear my throat.
well, I mean, if you've had enough practice, you do know where it is all the time.
Yeah, Josh has to never look at his joystick.
So with 3 retractable key rings and a nice ball, this guy built a 6-axis mouse. Just
Okay.
grip the ball in the middle, and you've got 6 degrees of movement.
How does it know what is forward and backwards?
It's the retract. It's the.
See, there's little sensors.
no, no, no,
on it,
no.
so
Here's
it's
the
gonna-
thing. Are they kind of somewhat offset? Because
Yeah.
think they're all in one plane.
No, they're rotation sensors though.
And they rotate.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. It doesn't know the length. It doesn't know
Your
the
ball
length
is only
of
in
them.
one plane, or does your ball rotate?
Yeah, it only knows
Well,
the
then.
it only knows the 3 directions that those things are pointing.
Come on, pull it away.
That is interesting.
Push it. Push it real
Push it
good.
Real good.
Huh.
Twist it. Bop it.
That is true. Twisting it also works.
Yep.
Interesting.
6.
That's pretty neat.
Yeah.
Come on, push and pull.
So you've got your throttle, you've got your roll, you've got your pitch, you got your yaw.
Yeah, that is interesting.
It's
There
there
it
he
goes.
goes. Watch him pull it back.
Just
and
do
He
more
looks like a
motion.
guy that would create a 6-axis mouse.
Oh
Yeah, yeah,
Not
basically.
not maybe for a space
out of
sim, but, you know.
out of retractable keyring.
Oh, that's
keychain
amazing.
Things.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. The only thing I'm thinking is how do you make sure it gets back to center, because it will creep off of center eventually.
He's definitely a government worker.
He's got all those parts sitting around.
No, because those guys always have like your badge is on a retractable.
Those are motorized. They're not.
no.
No.
Those aren't
Just like-
motorized?
Those
No,
are just
that's just
sensors.
spring.
That's a
I use
sensor
that brand
on
myself at work.
on the axis. The keyring is like further up.
I
see
see.
it go forwards and backwards there, Josh?
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
Because imagine if Logitech was going to sell you one of these. I don't think it'd be the price of a couple of sensors and a couple of key rings.
Nope.
No, but this is a good area for them to get into. Because not everybody's going to
seriously.
make these things. That's really cool. Yeah. Those look bigger than keyring sized holsters, guys. I'm sorry.
I don't know. Have
Would
you
you
ever
like me
been
to
a
go pull
janitor?
mine out?
Well, obviously you have not been. But no, that's key ring janitor size.
He just has the.
Maybe janitor size, yes, but not normal government.
So it's
worker
basically a
size.
joystick that's flexing to the angle of the string from the retractable keyring. The circle thing behind it is where it's
Yeah.
is where the string's coming out of.
It's where the tension
It's
comes
where
from.
the reel is.
Yeah.
So it's just 3 joysticks that all point at a point in space at the same time,
Right.
and some
that's
match.
cool idea.
Gives you your acceleration and deceleration.
Yeah.
I
That's
think it's
neat.
brilliant.
That's a really good idea.
That's neat. Josh, what do you got?
Me. You know,
Yes,
this
you.
is an older product, but one that
Fits you.
I use all the time. The Corsair is still making the 2500 series 2.1 speakers, and
I still
this
use
thing.
these.
Yeah, you got Ryan has them on his desk.
Yeah, I mean they just thump. They've got great sound. They're really flat, which is kind of nice.
Yeah.
And yeah, I hammer those things in games, workouts,
Oh, it's
washing
working out.
dishes to music.
Yeah.
Yes. These are all the things that I do.
I'm a big fan of having a hardware volume control. My only complaint about these, and I'm curious if you have the same complaint, Josh, is like, so you hit the button to like mute or unmute, like you hit the volume button, and it dims the controls in the LCD screen up top,
Sure.
but it doesn't dim it enough for you to be able to tell at a glance whether or not it's muted or unmuted.
Oh.
No, I haven't had that because I rarely ever mute mine. So not a
Does
not a
it
problem with
unmute
me.
if you just turn the volume at all?
Yes.
No,
it will
when my
good.
kids start complaining, all I do is turn the volume up.
Yeah. Yeah, it's good.
These are kind of expensive, $300.
They are, but boy,
I've had them for a while, and they still sound fantastic.
You're getting
I
good
will
quality
admit.
speakers, several Class D amps built in. Like,
Yep.
I mean, it's, like you would pay a lot of
I
money
think
to do
I've
something
had
like that
these for
separately.
5 years now, if not more.
Been that long, really? Yeah.
Yeah.
The input
They're-
is just
Good speakers are just good speakers.
It's just 1/8" phono in, right? That's all. That's how you can get the sound into these. They don't have any kind of USB
It's got
thing?
multiple inputs.
It is
I
not a
think.
USB. It's not a
not
digital
USB?
input.
Okay.
No. Yep.
That's what I was trying to figure out.
Cool. Corsair Gaming Audio Series SP2500. I totally would not have been able to tell you what the name of those products were, what those speakers
What
were
the
on my desk.
model number is?
Yeah.
Yeah, no.
All you know is how they sound.
Corsair speakers.
Indeed. All right, and last but probably least, Alan.
So if you liked Myst and you liked Riven, holy crap, you definitely need to play The Witness. Because
Aren't you glad I told you about this?
that thing is a crazy puzzle. I am glad you told me about this.
Witness me, brothers.
And
I live, die. I play puzzles again.
Yeah, I may or may not have lost a majority of my last weekend on that thing.
It's an interesting game because if you're watching the video version, you see like the puzzle style is very simplistic, right?
Yeah.
It's very much it's a maze game. It's a finish the maze puzzles.
Yep.
But it gets way more complex, colors and shapes and patterns and all that type of stuff. I mean, if you look at this one, you're like, well, no, duh, I know how to finish that one.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, but it introduces a whole lot of mechanics.
It really does build on itself a lot,
Yes.
and it gets very complicated
And it's hard.
very quickly. Yeah.
And it's hard. It's not super easy. And then the idea is you're on an island, much like Myst or Riven.
Yeah. It's a similar kind of thing to that.
And
yeah.
you are, as you solve these puzzles, certain areas will open up for you, certain things will happen. And it's kind of an interesting little
And it-
puzzle.
and
I'm
it-
not nearly
and
as
it
far
looks-
into it
and
as
looks
Alan
pretty good.
is.
Like the graphics are well done.
Yeah, it's like not hyper realistic. It's an art style,
Yeah.
but it's
Yeah,
it's good.
It is definitely a specific art style, but
Yep.
it looks very good at
Yep.
at that style, right?
Is it shiny and chrome?
It is. No.
It's a kind of a little bit cartoony.
Yeah.
It's like realistic cartoony though.
Yeah.
Like that.
This is from Jonathan Blow, the guy who did Braid, which was another fantastic kind of platformer puzzle.
It's one of
This
those
is
things-
much less
It's one of those things I
platforming.
bought on Steam and never played.
It's a really good game. You'd like it a lot.
Yeah, I know. I need to do that.
This is like that meets Antichamber.
Yes.
Yeah.
A good old puzzle.
You know,
game
I
of,
couldn't
what,
get
2-3
into
years ago?
Antichamber,
No, I couldn't either.
but
Oh, yeah, I couldn't beat it. It's tough. But it
This
was
thing
fun.
though, holy crap! I mean, really, you might like if you really get into games like that, you might want to like set a timer or something on your desk, and like say,
This-
okay, I'm only gonna play for a couple hours.
a lot of people in like the gaming ecosystem, like the podcast I listen to, are playing a lot of this, and they're talking about like you're going to take notes. You're going to have a notepad next to it, and you're going to write down, things that you found out, so that when you go to the next puzzle that kind of integrates it, you remember how to do it exactly.
Yep.
There are people that are like, you're taking screenshots of what's going on, and you're going out of the game, and you're rotating that picture in Photoshop or something.
Yep.
Or you're like adjusting opacity so you can try to see something that maybe you can't see in the game itself. So there's a lot of stuff to it like that. It's not as simple as, I think it would be impossible for somebody to do this without writing something down at
Yeah.
the very least.
Yeah, you definitely either that or just be taking screenshots a lot.
You're right.
How do
Screenshots
you
are
compare
nice.
this to the Talos principle?
I did not play that.
I didn't either.
I heard some people talking about that
People
comparison.
were comparing it to that. Yeah.
The comparison, from what I think, this is from the Giant Bomb guys. I believe they said that like the Talos Principle is a much better story to go along with the puzzles, but
Yep.
The Witness has much better puzzles. Like
Yep.
the puzzles are more
There's
fun.
there's not
and
much
stuff.
story in this.
Right.
There's audio clips that you can hear throughout the thing.
Right.
But it's not so much of a direct like this is the plot.
Yeah.
There's not really a plot.
And you can see some of the art style here from some of the screenshots, and the island is not. Island's not really that big, but you can see, you get an idea of like the different environments that exist. There's the island, and you can kind of see all the.
But it is like
different
it
segments.
is like Myst in that it's a little bit spooky because like nothing is alive.
Correct.
Right? Like
Yeah, you're the only one there.
you're the
more or
only
less.
one there. Like you're the only living thing there.
So this is The Witness. It is, you can buy it on Steam, and I think he sells it. Jonathan Blow sells it through his website directly still,
directly,
right?
and it's
Like
DRM
it's a
free. if you
DRM
get it
free version.
directly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
You can only do-
$39.99.
You can only do one or the other, which kind of bugs me because typically like
You can buy both if you want.
well, you can, yeah. But like if typically when I equate DRM free, I immediately go to like Humble Bundles, which typically will give you the DRM free version you can download straight from them, and they would also give you a Steam key if you request it. Right. This one
I
does
guess
not do
I don't
that.
understand the point of that, but I mean, sure.
I don't know if the kind of people that just want a DRM free.
Do you think that if I buy a Steam version, I should get the DRM free version too.
Well, see, I didn't do it, but that's because it doesn't apply to me anymore so much. But like when I was in the Navy and like on a sub, right, I would need a DRM free version so I could play it offline.
Okay.
Right.
Fair.
But then when I'm not on the sub, like I would want the convenience of just like the Steam version.
Running Steam and stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just checked Humble Bundle, and yeah, you can buy it via Steam Key or DRM
Yeah,
free.
they very clearly underline the or to make it to remind people like, look, this is not.
I wonder what the reasoning would be, why it would be different. But
I don't know.
Very good game. It's The Witness. It's $39. I would encourage you, and Alan obviously encourages you to check it out since it was his pick of the week. That's going to be it, everybody. Thank you for hanging out for the podcast. Again, Wednesday nights, 10 p.m. Pacific, 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Pacific. We record the show at pcper.com/live. You can go to pcper.com/podcast to find all the RSS feeds. Don't forget, if you like the video version, you want to have a downloadable version of it, you can. We have now a video RSS feed that people have been asking for years and years and years. That after our first Patreon limit was hit, our first milestone was hit, we decided to implement the RSS feed. So it costs us, it's costing us in bandwidth for sure, because it's like a 1.4 gigabyte file each week that, hundreds of people are downloading. But it's, hey, we're here to create stuff that you guys want. And then, of course, if you want to support us on Patreon, it's patreon.com/PCPer, and we thank you very much for that. With that, everybody, we will see you next week. I'm Ryan Shrout.
I'm Jeremy Hellstrom.
I'm Twalrith.
And I'm Alan Malentano.
Bye, everybody.
Good night.
If you enjoyed this content, consider supporting in-depth technical content by contributing at patreon.com/PCPer.